Welcome back to the Nimber Tribe podcast, everyone. I'm super stoked to have Harsha Dharmana on the pod today. He is helping renowned CEOs and high-performing professionals to thrive without feeling anxious, drained, and burned out, and he is doing that through breathwork. He is an Oxygen Advantage advanced instructor, XPT performance breath coach, and the founder of the SFH Breathwork. It's so good to have you on the show.
Great intro. Well done. And thank you so much for your time and having me on here. I really appreciate it.
I'm so stoked for this conversation. We're going to do a deep dive on everything that has to do with breathwork, especially focusing on that kind of connection between like peak performance, performing in business, performing in life, and how breathwork connects all of the dots there. Where I would like to start us off is your origin story, because I think you have such a distinct story that brought you to breathwork and also what you kind of did before breathwork entered into your world. So if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I guess I'll start with my corporate life, right? So I ended up just falling into the recruitment industry. So I worked recruiting high-end technologists and mathematicians into quite a niche area. It's within the finance space in general, but within that, a specialist area called electronic trading. Worked very closely with two good friends. We started a business, an opportunity came up to start a business together. You know, we did really well. You know, I think we worked together for 11, 12 years now. We complemented each other in a very, very specific way. We just had the right chemistry. Underpinned by all of that was a lot of drive and hard work and a real keen willingness to do whatever it took to succeed in some terms of what we define success as, but we'll probably get to that in a bit. And basically, I spent 12 years just living that corporate life. So the expat corporate life, this was all in Hong Kong, and it was super fast paced. I was doing very well financially, and it was exciting at the start. But the excitement started to wear off, started to get more and more drained, and I felt that the pressure, as I was earning more money, I felt there was just more pressure associated with everything. And so that was going on for like 11 years. Um, and there's like a few different stories that were happening in conjunction that kind of collided. So whilst I was living in Hong Kong, building and growing a business, I met my wife Jade. We had two kids. Life on the outside was going very well. Underneath it all, I mentioned there was this element of pressure and stress that comes with a job like that or a career like that. But there was another story that was playing out as well. A sad story in that I think a year into moving into Hong Kong, so this is probably 12, 13 years ago, my mum was unfortunately diagnosed with a very random system atrophy. So it's a degenerative brain disease, no treatment, no cure. And that came as a huge shock. So she was very much the head of the family. She looked super young. I remember being out with my mum, um, and we'd be shopping or something. I was be like, "Mom, hey, what do you think of this?" And people would be like, "What, Mom?" Like she looks either like we thought she was your sister or girlfriend. She looked that young. So super healthy, no bad habits, really looked after herself, was very sociable. And then this happened, right? And it came as a huge shock. Um, and life could have been different. You know, my initial reaction was just to leave Hong Kong and go back home. But my parents and my mum in particular was like, look, you know, I have to deal with this. There's nothing that any of us can do about it. And what pleasure I can derive from life is going to be seeing you guys thrive. And so she was like, if you come back and I can't see that, that's going to make everything worse. So okay, I went traveling back to the UK as much as I could to see her. But I was in effect still living in Hong Kong and playing out my career and my life. But things came to a head probably 3.5 years ago now when she eventually passed away. So she battled with the illness for 10 years, passed away. And it was at that point pretty quickly that I just had a voice in my head just saying, well, what are you doing? And I started to really reflect, look really into what my life looked like at that point of time. And aside from the paychecks, I really, underneath it all, I wasn't really enjoying many aspects of my life. So loads of pressure. I barely saw my kids, so I'd see them maybe in the evenings for 10 minutes if I managed to get back for bedtime. Wouldn't see them in the morning. I was struggling with a lot of stress and anxiety. I didn't know it at the time, maybe, but now looking back, it was pretty crazy. I had health issues related to my gut health, which was super bad, to the point that I had 2 colonoscopies over a period of 2.5 years. I was convinced something bad was wrong, but the doctors couldn't find anything, and said that everything was okay, even though I knew it wasn't. And so I was just like, look, I need a change. No, I don't need any more money in the sense of the cost that comes with it. Um, and I've never been too fancy. I didn't have aspirations to drive around in a Ferrari or anything like that. So I felt that I was secure enough to make a change. So I made a plan. I let my business partners know. I think I gave them about a year and said, look, I'm going to be out in 12 months. Let's work together to structure the business and make sure everything's cool when I go. I ended up leaving. Right. So I left the corporate world. So I left Hong Kong, moved to Spain initially for a couple of years. And I was out. I was out of corporate life. I was out of my Hong Kong friendships. It was just a complete change. I was a full-time dad, doing food shops, washing up, preparing snack boxes for the kids, driving them to school, picking them up from school. My life was just so different. And it's during that time that I started looking into breathwork. Right. So it was actually towards the end of my time in Hong Kong that I was just, after my mum had passed away, I was just in bed, just scrolling YouTube. I was just grieving, couldn't be bothered to do anything, didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to do anything, just on YouTube. And I found the Wim Hof documentary, the one on the Vice magazine. I don't know if you've seen it.
I
It's
think
called The
so.
Iceman. It's infamous now. And I just looked at that and I was so hooked on him as a person, super curious about this technique. And so I just started, I think immediately just started practicing it. And literally after the first session, I was like, what just happened? Like, how can your breath do something so powerful? It immediately lifted my mood, my energy levels. I think at the time I was a perfect Wim Hof breather because it's still very competitive. So like, yeah, you can hold your breath for like 3.5 minutes. It's like, there's so many aspects that slotted into my psyche and like the way I thought about everything there. So I started practicing Wim's method, and when I got to Spain, in between dadding, I was just learning more breathwork. So practicing Wim Hof method, but then started going down the rabbit hole, and I found the oxygen advantage, and that really taught me about actual breathing and what was happening at a physiological level. It lent into performance again. That really, really caught my attention. So I was like, right, I'm going to get certified in the oxygen advantage. That led to me getting certified in some performance breathing with the XPT stuff. And as I was learning and then implementing everything that I was learning on myself, I was just like, wow, it's like, this is cool. It's having such an impact on so many different aspects of my own life, from I don't know, just my mood, big improvements in my gut health, my emotional reactivity, my performance in exercise. So I was a big CrossFitter at the time. I'm still into like the high intensity workouts, and I saw big differences just applying certain techniques. And what I loved about the oxygen advantage was that there were some measurables. There was some data that we could do. There's some measurements we could do to track how well I was breathing, and that was really powerful. I could see things were changing and working. So long story short, I was like, this is cool. I need to tell other people about this. I need to help other people. Um, and that's what led me to start my coaching business. So yeah, it was tough in Spain. It was slow at the start because being a dad, a full-time dad is a full-time job. So getting another business up and running was tough. It was challenging just from a time perspective. And you need so much time. You'll know this more than anyone else, right? You need so much time at the start, especially in businesses like the ones that we're running ourselves. But since we transitioned our family to Bali, which was 9 months ago now, and we have a structure and a setup where my wife and I can work effectively full time, things have really snowballed, and yeah, it's going well. I'm really enjoying it.
I love that story. And I feel like there's such a sad element, of course, in it with like your mother like passing away and like getting sick in the first place. But I think there's so many relatable things that I hear there and that are very similar to my story. For me, it was my own health that was completely falling apart. And I think you said something really important there in the end where you were talking about like I was really stressed, I was really anxious, but because of that kind of fast-paced lifestyle, we are not even really aware of it. Like if you would have talked to me maybe a month or two before I completely burned out, I would have been like, yeah, there's a little bit of stress, like I feel the pressure, but I wasn't aware of like how bad it actually was because I was just running. And it really like, for me, it came when I slowed down or I needed to slow down because my body was like, we're not doing this anymore. And then rebuilding my health that I understood like, I was feeling like shit. I just wasn't aware of it because it was my normal. So I wasn't really reflecting on it because it was the only thing I kind of knew for a very long time span. And only when I really worked on my health and understood like, oh, this is how people feel, like this is how amazing it can get. And that's kind of what I hear there that you discovered as well when you looked into breath work and then making these kind of life changes, of course, as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think environment to everything is all right.
Yeah.
I think there are a few things here that contribute to that lack of awareness, let's say. And firstly, I was just so disconnected from my body. I just didn't know what was going on. Psychologically, I probably underneath it, or I didn't want to know what was going on. You know, there were targets I wanted to achieve. I didn't want to, you know, we were competitive as a group. So there was that pressure. Weekends would just be going out, Hong Kong expat life, going out drinking at the weekends, forgetting about it all. And you're just in that world, so you don't have really any time to connect really, because you're just on constantly. And even like when I wasn't working or out socializing, then I was a hardcore, like I love my CrossFit. You know, I was never still ever. So yeah, so I definitely, I think just that awareness piece is huge. And I think that's what people struggle with the most because the information is out there now. People are talking about this more and more. Now there's so much. I'm not the only one who's talking or you either about stress and burnout and stuff, but I still feel that it just doesn't land as much as it should, just because people have the blinkers on, and you know it's hard to get through that. People need to
100%. If someone
experience
is listening,
something. Yeah.
yeah. If someone is listening who might be on that path right now, like they are kind of having the blinkers on, they're just like going about it, like working away. What are kind of common symptoms, things that your clients come to you with where you feel like, okay, these are kind of the warning signs that we might need to take into consideration if we want to make a shift long term?
Yeah. Uh, so there's a few. Sleep is a big one. So if there's someone who struggles falling asleep, staying asleep, or they wake up and they just feel just as tired as they did before they went to sleep, then that's a sign of stress for sure. Emotional reactivity. So the smallest of things cause spurts of anger, whether that's kids, traffic, anything kind of fairly inconsequential in the grand scheme of things can just set you off. And then that's a sure sign of a high level of stress. Clients come to me because they just say, I can't focus. Like I try to do a task, but then like, I literally can't think straight for 10, 20 seconds. I jump from this to that. And so that hypervigilance, that inability to focus on one thing is again another huge symptom. Overtiredness is another one. Again, most of my clients are just like, I am shattered. It's just I can't, but I'd love to sleep for like 7 days straight. No, they're just super tired. So that would be another symptom. Yeah, I would say they were the main ones off the top of my head. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good checklist to kind of check in with oneself and see like, do we have any of these showing up in our life right now? If we think about breathwork, I think it is a term that is been thrown around all over the internet right now. And I think most people, when they hear it, they think of the kind of hyperventilation
Mm.
Wim Hof style. If you would define it to someone who maybe hasn't heard of it or just give us a definition that kind of is describing breathwork in your terms, what would that be?
Yeah, so I thought long and hard about this one because it's so broad, so it's quite hard to capture. But I'm going to give it my best shot, right? So let's start with the aspect of the way you breathe is a direct reflection of your nervous system. Okay, if we start there, and then let's then say that we experience life through the window of our nervous system at any moment in time. So effectively, our breath, or the way we breathe, is a reflection of our experience of life itself. So if you put it like that, it's pretty important.
100%.
So we can take that again at a deeper layer. So if you're someone who you have a little think back to how you might breathe at any point in time, so your just natural daily breathing patterns, if they are fast, shallow, breath through an open mouth, then that's a sign of stress in your nervous system, of overactivation, of high arousal. And when you're in this state, then the emotions that you're most likely to feel, so the affect of that state of your nervous system, are going to be things like fear, anxiety, hypervigilance, being nervous. That's a negative aspect, or a negative state to be in your life, if that's something that you feel for prolonged periods of time. Then the opposite of that, if your breath is light, low and slow and through the nose, then that has an effect of calming the nervous system. It tells your nervous system that you're safe. And once we have safety within our physiology, then the affective states of safety are then joy, being relaxed, being grounded, creative, wanting to connect with other humans, which is a much more positive foundation for your experience of life. So change the way you breathe, shift your nervous system into a desired state, and then that just shifts your whole experience of life itself.
I love that breakdown. That is so profound. And I find it so funny because all of us are breathing all the time. So like it's easy to kind of dismiss the importance of it. But I think what you said there is so important, that like how we're breathing is then determining our state, and that state is determining how we feel and how we experience the world. Exactly. So it obviously makes a big difference. Can we maybe start there with the everyday, because there are so many techniques for like down regulation, up regulation, but as we just said, like we're breathing all the time. How would you approach someone who just wants to improve their everyday breathing? Where would we even start with something like that?
Cool. So firstly, I'll give them a big high five, because that's where you start, right? It's so like the other stuff, the sexier stuff, the hyperventilation, there are benefits to that, but they're not going to help you with your day-to-day breathing. And in a lot of cases, they'll make your day-to-day breathing worse if you're unaware of your current state of breathing. So yes, high five for starting up functional breathing. And this is where I start with every one of my clients. And in short, the one thing you can first do is build an awareness of whether you're breathing through your nose or through your mouth. There are no physiological adaptations for the mouth to breathe, other than it being an emergency access to the lungs, should the nose be out of action. But other than that, all the physiological adaptations, there's over 30 of them. I'm not going to bore you or the listeners with all of them, but that's what the nose is for. Okay, so we start to breathe through the nose at all times, unless we're doing intense exercise, right? So 95% of the time we should be breathing in and out of the nose, right? Then there were 3 aspects of functional breathing that we would work on. Firstly, that's breathing low. So this is all about the breathing mechanics. So a lot of people will breathe into the upper chest. It's a restrictive breathing pattern. It takes on more energy. It increases the stress response because it's shallower. So if we're breathing up here, and we're using accessory muscles to breathe, like shoulder and chest and neck, we want to move to a breathing pattern that's fully driven by the diaphragm, and it's nice and low. And rather than breathing vertically, we're breathing laterally, and we're creating a 360-degree expansion of the lower rib cage. So I'll just show our viewers here. We want the rib cage, or the lower rib cage, to be moving, expanding like this when we breathe in, and just falling back into place when we breathe out. Okay? So that's the first aspect, is breathing mechanics and breathing low. The second aspect is breathing light. So actually, a big problem that a lot of people have is over breathing. And without getting into a rabbit hole on the technicalities of this, we need to maintain a healthy balance between carbon dioxide and oxygen in our bloodstream. Okay, that maintains a nice balance within our whole physiology. And if we overbreathe, we disrupt that relationship. So we want to be breathing light and not heavy. And a way to think about this, it's a little bit nuanced, is just, can you hear your breathing? So if you can hear your breathing at rest, you're probably over breathing. Our breathing at rest should be super quiet, super light, super gentle. So it's light, low, and the next is the rate, or how fast we're breathing. We should be breathing slowly. Many of us, I think, breathe 16 to 20 breaths per minute at rest, and it's just way too high, right? We want to be breathing sub 10, ideally around like 8 to 9 breaths per minute. So again, how you can change that is just becoming aware. If you're breathing fast, you'll naturally breathe fast if you're breathing through the mouth. So literally closing your mouth and breathing through your nose will slow your breathing down significantly. So it's another easy way to do it. And then just slowing your breathing down in moments that you're starting to feel high stress or panic or overwhelm, just literally going into your breath and slowing it down. I like to model a breath I think if you read breathwork books or you're interested in the field, people say 6 breaths per minute. So you can achieve that by breathing in for 5 or out for 5, or in for 4 or out for 6. So we want to be breathing around 6 breaths per minute. And then when we come out of a practice like that, our breathing rate won't go down to 6 breaths per minute, but it will come down significantly from what it was before. Yeah?
So would that mean that I actually like sit down and maybe have my hands on my rib cage so I can kind of feel like if it is expanding or like where I'm breathing?
Correct. So the way that I work with my clients is we'll split each one up. So we'll spend a week or so on mechanics where you literally, put your hands underneath your lower 2 ribs and see if you can push your hands laterally outwards. And you just drill that. And it'll feel awkward and clunky at the start, especially if you breathe vertically. But in time, you'll rechange that motor pattern of your breathing and you'll start to breathe laterally. It normally takes, I've seen most clients get that within sometimes a few days, sometimes a couple of weeks. But it's just retraining.
So I would literally then sit down and do that for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, multiple times a day?
Yeah, you don't need to do it so it's like little amounts every day rather than sitting for like an hour a day or something unrealistic like that. So really, literally, if you do that twice for 3 minutes a day, that would be enough.
Sweet.
And then you'll start to carry that through into your breathing pattern when you're not thinking about it. And that's the end goal.
Perfect. So that's the first one. And then we said that we wanted to breathe light. In my head, I have a little bit of a conflict here. I don't know if anyone can relate to that. But if I'm thinking of light breathing, I'm thinking of kind of a fast breath. If I'm thinking of a deep breath, there's a little bit of conflict there. But I guess you're meaning that we don't hear the breath, as what you said. Like I can't hear myself breathing. So but I'm still trying to get it all the way down.
Correct. So it's like taking a smaller amount of air for it to be light, but bringing it nice and low.
Okay.
Using the lower 2 ribs and the diaphragm to draw the air lower into the lungs where it's efficient and not up to the upper chest.
Yes.
So we can model this. It might be easier just to model it so you can see, right? So if you think of it, a slow, deep breath or a slow, low breath, it would look like this, right? So you breathe in. And you breathe out. Okay, so that's slow and low. So if I was to do a shallow, fast breath, it would look like this. Yeah? Now, we could go for a fast, low breath, okay? And what we want to do when we're at rest is breathe light and low. So this would look like this. So light and gentle breath out low. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're still drawing that air deep into the lungs. And an exhale. But it's slow.
Okay.
There's 2 different things. Basically, it's the speed of the breath and then the size of the breath.
Yeah.
And so that's how, So it's a little bit nuanced, and there's other aspects to it as well. But yeah, that's it's a good starting point to get to get an idea of it.
Yes, 100%. So we would work with this for a couple of weeks, depending on kind of how quickly our body is picking it up, I guess, and maybe also how focused we are working on that. And then we would do what?
Yeah, so we can measure the functionality or your breathing efficiency using a score, using a measurement. Okay, it's called the control pause score, the BOLT score. Most people who have dysfunctional breathing or poor breathing, their BOLT score could be anything from 7 or 8 through to 13 or 14. We want to get that BOLT score to 25. That's the point where I think the exact number is that we can be like 91% confident that the breathing has moved from being dysfunctional to functional.
If we work on this kind of breathing pattern and we're slowly repatterning our own breathing, what does that then do to our body? What would be kind of shifts that we maybe see in like sleep quality improving and things that are quite tangible? And what would also happen kind of on the inside if we think about nervous system, like what's actually happening here?
Sure. So let's start with the nervous system first, and we can talk about kind of the symptomatic outcomes of having a more balanced nervous system. So basically, a breath that's light, low, and slow will bring the nervous system back to balance. So it'll bring it down from states of hyperarousal, so highly stressed states or anxious states, into the rest and digest state. Okay, so we're bringing more balance into the nervous system. How does that show up? Well, sleep improves, clarity of thought improves, energy levels improve. The key part of breathing like this is that it optimizes how much oxygen is actually getting delivered to the cells in your brain and your muscles. So a lot of people come to me, they're like, oh, I can't think straight, I've got brain fog, tiredness, all of that stuff. We'll see significant improvements because we are optimizing the oxygen delivery system right at the level of the cells. So this is where functional breathing has a huge impact. Also, when we improve breathing mechanics, we start to improve posture. When people say the core, everyone thinks of the abs, but that's a really small part of the core. So when we're breathing efficiently from a mechanics perspective and our breath is nice and low, we're actually strengthening the core from the inside out. So people with back pain, people who are playing a lot of sports but finding themselves getting injured a lot, we'll see improvements with that by improving their functional breathing. We can say that functional breathing will lead to functional movement. The two are very, very closely aligned. So if you breathe well, you'll move a lot better and reduce a lot of risk for injuries.
So crucial. And such a cool thing that, like, it is kind of simple, right? It's not easy, but it is kind of simple, and it has such a huge impact on so many different areas of our lives. I'm always fascinated when I listen to you.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool. There's so much to it as well. It's hard, there's so many different outcomes because it's, as I said, it's at the level of the nervous system, which controls basically every major function in your body. So you can optimize that by just breathing properly. For the majority of your time.
And if we work on that breathing pattern that we just discussed, I guess we lay kind of the first block of foundation.
Yes.
Where would someone go from there, or what else do we need to think about while we are still on this first layer of the foundation?
So let's transport 2 to 3 weeks. Right? Our BOLT score is 25. We're confident now that we're breathing functionally. We're starting to see some improvements in the stuff that we expect, our stress levels, our sleep, clarity of thought, tiredness, energy in sports and stuff like that, right? So then the next step is really working on nervous system regulation. So now, we have a foundation of functional breathing, then we can start to use specific tools. So people normally go to the tools first without fixing functional breathing.
Yep.
And so the impact of that is very limited. Right. But if we do it the other way around, it can be really powerful. So now what we do is start building in protocols like, let's pick a really famous, so like box breathing, for example. So box breathing is, if we take a box of 4, you'd breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and hold for 4. And you would cycle that for 5 to 8 minutes. Tools like that then really start to bring resilience and balance to the nervous system. So when we're talking about nervous system health, we're looking at it in 2 ways. Firstly, like in real time, something's happened at work or at home. I've moved out of my window of tolerance. I'm moved into a really high stress state. If our nervous system isn't healthy, we can remain in that elevated state for prolonged periods of time. And that's when stress starts to turn to overwhelm, to anxiety, and becomes chronic. So ideally, a healthy nervous system would allow us to feel those emotions, whatever comes up, but then it's flexible enough for us to come back down into a balanced state. And so when we use tools like this, that's what we're facilitating. So real time, something's happened at work, you feel really stressed, right? I'm going to have the awareness to understand where I am in my nervous system. I know I'm highly stressed, highly activated. I'm going to step away and I'm going to do 3 minutes of box breathing. That practice will bring balance to your nervous system. And so you'll move from being highly stressed into a calmer, more grounded state. Okay, so that's one example of nervous system regulation in play in real time. But then another way of looking at it is then how do we build resilience and tolerance? So that window that I was talking about, that window of tolerance, is larger. So that event that triggered you into a state of stress in a month's time, perhaps that same event won't trigger you in the same way because now we've built more resilience. Does that make sense? So that's like
it makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Part.
Yes.
And then after that, then we can start to do the upregulation stuff. So now that there's balance to the nervous system, and it depends. It's not all about like slow, calming breath work. It just depends on where someone is in their nervous system state. In general, 80% of the clients are in that highly activated state. Okay. But however, if we experience really severe life events, a reaction to a trauma could take us from really high stress, so hyperarousal, into hypoarousal. Right. So this is when we're talking about free states.
Yep.
And when we're in these states, we've just got no energy. We don't want to interact with anyone. We've got no motivation. And this is where upregulation techniques can be really useful. So we start to use faster breathing patterns to bring energy into the nervous system. So that's another aspect of what we would do as part of nervous system regulation work. And the final piece of the puzzle is looking deeper. So this is where breathwork can get interesting. It's a bit more experiential, but when we look at techniques like conscious connected breathwork, I was talking about triggers before. These can be effective when used very carefully, and it's an important part of how I teach breathwork. But we can use techniques like conscious connected breathwork to access altered states of consciousness in the subconscious mind, and start the process of processing, let's say just process.
Beautiful. Yeah. So much in that answer.
Yeah, sorry. I know there's a lot there.
100%. And I think it's so crucial what you said there in the beginning. Like most of us, when we are these kind of doers, we want to build the company. We are very competitive probably by nature, and we're just going. We are often in these very stressed states. So our goal then is to come back down to earth and like find balance first before we do maybe stuff like Wim Hof breathing or a lot of these very famous exercises, because I think they look cool, right? Like you're sitting on the beach in Bali and you're like doing the big breathing and all of that. It looks cool on camera. But I find that super important to be like, okay, the first step is actually probably down regulation, depending of where you are, of course.
Totally. And in a weird way, you will, if you are someone whose nervous system is out of sync and you're used to just constant action, your nervous system almost gets conditioned to it. So we'll say like what your nervous system craves is not actually what it truly needs, right? So if you're a doer, an achiever, you have very little time to actually wind down properly. When you try to, it will feel awkward. It will feel uncomfortable. Your mind will be saying, what are you doing? And you have to push through that. And that's, again, part of the coaching side of what I do is it's not just, this is what you need to do. It's like helping people really just practice sitting there, because so many just find it so awkward. And it's even, ask someone to go for a 20-minute walk without their phone. They'll find it difficult when people are in this state. Or sit down at a dinner table and have a conversation with your family for 45 minutes and be present. A lot of things are very, very difficult in states of overstimulation and activation. Getting this true rest that we really need, and not all the time. I'm talking about going from 100% action to 85 and 15% of true rest. So this isn't about like stop what you're doing and sit like a Buddha for like 7 hours a day, right? It's just not realistic. And go and achieve and go and do your pursuits, your Ironmans and Hyroxes and triathlons, and get promoted, and all that stuff, but just not 100% of the time, because that's just going to lead inevitably to burnout, or serious health issues. We're just not built physiologically to handle that for prolonged periods of time. And it's so obvious. Like, what's the stat about stress? Like 90% of doctors' visits are stress related. 4 out of 5 of the biggest killing diseases are stress related diseases. It's all plain to see. So to manage that, I'm just saying pull back 15%, 85-15. And in that 15%, learn to get true rest and be comfortable in that space, because that's where it's really effective. I think that's kind of my mission.
It's a little bit like charging a battery, I feel like. I think that's easier for us to kind of comprehend. Like if you have your phone, you will charge it at the end of the day if you use it a lot. And we just don't do that. Like we just pretend that we can keep going at 100% all the time. And I think to really take this time out of your day and recharge is going to give you so much leverage throughout the rest of the day where you're actually in action. Yeah, I think it might sound like slowing down, but you can go much further.
Yeah, and that's it, right? And I think, look, I was speaking to someone about this earlier today. We're all talking about this stuff more, right? We're talking about mental health, we're talking about burnout, talking about stress. These are big topics now. But I still think there's still so much talk and very, very little implementation even in the corporate world. I think, like, yeah, we've got a wellness team. Yeah, once a week we'll get a breathwork coach in to do a workshop, or once a month, and that's as far as it really goes. And I think we need to be going at a deeper level, and on a wider scale, to really start working on these issues of both physical and mental health, because it's all stress related, or very largely.
Is there something top of mind that you would love to see more of in the corporate world, or like an idea of how people will go about it?
It's just cultural change, right? Just having, I don't know, not like, I just feel that, and again, I've not been in the corporate world for a few years, but I don't know, like, how would people feel if there was just someone just turned their computer off in the middle of the day, turned their phone off, no emails, and were just sat, eyes closed at their desk for 10, 15 minutes? I don't know, how would that go down, really? No, it needs to be open, and that should be more than allowed and accepted, and there should be time created for that. And so just little things where there's literally, it's scheduled in people's diaries for time for self-care throughout the day. Because the more you can do in just little bits of time, the more impactful it is. So yeah, I think just at a very practical level, having time out, creating spaces, um, having people there, having a wellness team to work with specific individuals who are feeling highly stressed and anxious. Yeah, I think it's super important. And it's only going to lead to more performance and more revenue at the end of the day, which is what these companies really care about. But it's just going to take a bit of a different approach.
I'm completely with you on that. And I think there's still this correlation between like time set on the desk equals output, which is really not true, even if we think about just the nervous system and how kind of how we are set up as people. Like we're not meant to sit somewhere for 8 hours and be productive for 8 hours. That's just not going to happen. And that's why I love to work with leaders, because I feel like if we can implement this on the top level, then I hope that it like triples down and people understand how we actually build, how we can work with our own setup. And then I hope that that translates more into organization, and we're going to see much, much more of that in a few years.
It will happen. It's just the pace of it, I feel, is it feels slow, especially in probably more traditional industries like the finance and tech worlds. Yeah, it feels a little bit slower. But yeah, I'm sure it's gonna happen. It needs to happen. I think as soon as people start to see the positive net effect, then everyone else will cotton on. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of time before that happens.
And I think that's a nice thing with breathwork, because you see it kind of quickly. Like the effect is maybe not immediate, but fast. At least that's how it felt for me. I started breathwork, I think, just with different apps like Open, for example, and I would just put it on in the evenings because I couldn't fall asleep. And now it works like clockwork. Like I can just put it on and like I know it's gonna work, and it's such a game changer. It's really, really fun to see.
Yeah, I know. We have to move away from like the bead sandals woo woo perception of breath work. there is that aspect, right? Go to Ibiza, go to Bali and do have a breathwork experience, right? That's why we call it experiential breathwork. But then there's the opposite side that's it's like grounded in physiology and scientific research. And we're looking at stuff like sleep and like stress in the nervous system and stuff that we can measure, right? So a lot of these guys, again, it's like, well, I'll measure you. Let's use data to show where you're at and where you could be. And I think that's where it can be really powerful, because not everyone leans into the more esoteric aspects, but a lot of people say, okay, well, if you can prove to me that you could decrease my stress by half in 8 to 12 weeks. And again, I think that's where people start to get more and more interested.
Yes. And that's also why everyone needs to follow you online, because I think you're such a cool representation of that. Like, you're building the business, you're being the super dad, and then I see you in the gym, like crushing the session. Like, it's just really inspiring to watch. And I think there are so many people aspiring to be that. So I think it's awesome that there is someone who's actually like doing it and showing it and like giving us the tools to actually achieve that as well. So that's just awesome.
Thank you. Super cool. It's not easy, right? The social media world, and it's hard. It's challenging, but I just think I'm just showing people stuff that I do, that I've done, and hoping that resonates with people. So yeah, but yeah, little bits of encouragement like that keep me going. So thank you, appreciate it.
I really enjoy following along. Is there anything that you feel we haven't touched upon, or that you would like to add into the mix before we wrap it up and tell everyone where to find you?
I think it's gone so quick. I think that's always a sign of a good conversation. But no, thank you for having me on, and yeah, it's been super chill, and it's been great to talk to you. And I feel like we've got most things covered, I think. Trying to think if there's anything else, but nothing's coming to mind right now. So yeah, maybe it's time to move on from there.
I think we developed a really nice blueprint, kind of probably following the structure that you have in your program as well, and like start with the functional breathing, like your everyday breathing, and then go more into like, okay, do I need to upregulate? Do I need to downregulate? Where are we at? Awesome. Can you tell everyone where to find you online?
So obviously LinkedIn, also Instagram, so _breathwork. So they're the main places right now. I am thinking of producing some longer form content. I think we're all getting frazzled and drained by short form, dopamine draining content. And I think it's important to give people a little bit more meat on the bone when it comes to this. So I think Instagram's great for awareness, but thinking about going deeper, giving people some real solutions to the problems that they're facing. So yeah, watch this space. Might be some longer form content coming out. But yeah, other than that, LinkedIn and Instagram.
Perfect. And we're going to have all of that linked down in the show notes. Thank you so much for this awesome conversation.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me, and I'm sure I'll speak to you again
very soon, I hope. All right, tribe. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and a comment below. There's going to be new episodes dropping every Wednesday, covering everything from entrepreneurship to health, basically giving you all the tools that you need to peak perform in business and in your life. So please make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. This is a one-woman show. There is no network, there are no sponsors, and there is no editing team behind this. So it's up to me and you to spread the word about it. So if you have a friend who might benefit from what you learned today in this episode, please make sure to share a link with them. I see you next Wednesday. Much love.